Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more buckshot testing, and today we've got another very interesting combination to try out, and it's one that I don't exactly know how well it's going to work. These shells have been some pretty decent shells, but this choke has been a little finicky so far, and we definitely haven't found the perfect loading for it yet. But maybe that's these, maybe it's completely the wrong combination. I really don't know what's going to happen. But as for those shells I got out here today, I brought out some of the Federal copper plated buckshot loads. These ones are the 12 gauge 3-inch 41 pellet load of 4 buck, moving about 1100 feet per second. So definitely a pretty stout loading. 41 pellets of 4 buck flying down range is a lot of pellets, which I think may make or break what kind of pattern we see out of this choke today. It might be too much of a load going through this choke. But as for today's combo, I brought out the Remington 1187. It has a 28-inch barrel on it. And for the choke, we've got this one, which is the Carlson's Coyote choke. Now, Carlson's does not list a constriction for this Coyote choke, but I did measure it, and it actually comes out at a 665 constriction. So it's essentially a turkey choke. Now, there's not really much fancy going on with it. It does have a few small portholes in there, but it's definitely a pretty tight choke, and their marketing says it tends to perform well with BB, T-shot, and 4 buck out to 60 plus yards or something. So is this 41 pellets worth of 4 buck going to be too much going through this tight of a choke? I guess it could kind of go either way. But as for today's test, everything is set up the same as usual. I've got the big sheet of paper at 40 yards. I've got the chronograph so we can get our velocity from the shell, and I've got the templates that we can lay up over our results. So I guess let's head over here and take our shot with these Federal 41 pellet copper plated shells and see what they do through this Carlson's Coyote choke. 4 buck does tend to like a little bit tighter of a choke than something like a double-aught shell, so maybe this combination is going to be good. Maybe it's too many pellets going through too tight of a choke. But let's go take our shot and see what kind of result it gives us. Alright, so that shell gave us 1172 through the chrono. The boss claim is 1100, so we are above their claim, but that's pretty consistent for what we have been seeing from these shells, is mid 1100s or so. And coming from a 28-inch barrel, that absolutely makes sense. So looking good for velocity up here, but what kind of a pattern did they give us through that Carlson's Coyote choke down there at 40 yards? Let's go check it out and see what we got. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard paper, and this is what we got. And I gotta say, it ain't bad. And I definitely don't think that 665 constriction Coyote choke blew our pattern to pieces by any means, because we actually do have a pretty even, uniform spread of pellets here overall. Now, yeah, the white dot was my point of aim. We were just a touch low and maybe just a touch left. More than likely, it was probably me, but either way, that's why we use the backers so we can see our pattern. And while circling it, I counted 40 out of the 41 pellets on the paper. Number 41 might be this little dot right over here in the center of your screen on the wood. So if that's pellet number 41, then it's still maybe just a touch of a flyer, but it's still right in there, kind of lingering with the rest of them. Now, do we have a dedicated super hot core zone in this pattern? Definitely not. It's much more of a broad spread of pellets, but it's not completely blown all over the big sheet of paper either, because that paper is 36 inches wide by 44 or 45 inches tall. So that's absolutely a usable pattern. I think we have seen a tighter pattern or two from these shells in our previous testing, but I'd say this is about the average for them. It's a pretty solid and plenty usable enough performance. And I did measure it, and our pattern is right at 28 inches wide by about 18 inches tall. So it is a little wider than it is taller, but still, that's not bad at all. So a pretty even spread of pellets overall on the bare sheet of paper here, but let's throw a couple templates up and get a little better reference as to how it looks in a more real life type of scenario as well. So first up here is our 10-inch circle, and since we were just a touch low, I did favor it to where the actual middle of the pattern is, and we would have had about 11 pellets in that 10-inch circle at 40 yards. Now there is that little bit of a stripe across the middle there that doesn't have a pellet or two in it, so I guess you could call that a void technically, but I really don't think it would matter too much if we move that template left or right a little bit. You would still have somewhere between 9 and 11 or so pellets in there either way, and it would probably look about the same as well. So maybe not the hottest core we've seen out of these particular shells, but I think it's a little bit more of a broad pattern anyway. So let's throw some animal templates up, which will give us an idea of how it looks if you were to actually hunt with this combination. All right, so here's our deer template. And once again, I did favor it just a touch low since that's where our pattern actually was. And yeah, you would absolutely have a dead deer there without a doubt. Now, yeah, I know not everybody would use this combination of shell or choke for a deer hunt, but if you're one of the people that would want to use this, then it's a plenty good enough combination. And to be honest with you, that wouldn't be a terrible option for those deer drive type of scenarios in that thicker or brushier timber. It would give you a little bit of leeway to work with on a running deer. If you're in closer, you'd have a ton of pellets through the vitals. If you're out to 40 or 50 yards or so, which is probably about the max range for a 4-buck shell on a deer anyway, you would have a pretty nice spread to work with there and a good amount of leeway. So honestly, not a terrible option there for somebody in that type of scenario. But now let's throw the hog template up, which will give us a little bit better of an idea of how it looks on a smaller body animal, like a pig or a coyote or something like that. And here's that hog template, and it's pretty well the same story. You would have absolutely covered him in pellets at 40 yards. Absolutely a dead hog, no doubt about it. But this does also give us an idea of how it would look on a smaller predator-sized animal as well. A coyote would be just a little bit smaller than this hog template is, and you would have absolutely covered him in pellets. So yeah, that would be a death sentence on a coyote out at 40 to 50 yards all day long. And since it's a pretty even spread, then it would make your life a lot easier too on a potential running coyote as well. It would definitely give you a little more leeway to work with since they can kind of dart in and out of brush and stuff pretty quick. I wouldn't hesitate to take that out on a predator hunt where my shots are going to be inside of 60 yards. You would absolutely decimate them with that. So overall, I don't think that Carlson's coyote choke gave us the best pattern we've seen with these particular shells, but it didn't ruin it either, which is something I was really concerned with coming into it, with 41 pellets of 4-buck going through a 665 choke. It could have absolutely went sideways pretty quick and completely blew the pattern all over the place, but it didn't. And yeah, they claim it to be a coyote choke, and with a load of 4-buck like that, I think it would absolutely do the job perfectly fine on some coyotes. So definitely not too bad overall for results. And here's the wad from that shell. It's the same Federal kind of half length or maybe 3/4 length wads. They're only like maybe almost 2 thumb widths tall. So we know there was a bunch of pellets still stacked above this as well, but they seem to do their job pretty well, all things considered. This one does have several little tears and stuff on the tips of the petals. That's probably a combination of a lot of 4-buck pellets going through a tight choke, and that choke has some little porting on it. So that very well could have been what we saw here as to where it might have snagged in the portholes or something a little bit, but everything else looks very much normal. And clearly, I don't think we were necessarily over constricting these at all just yet, where it completely ruined our pattern either, because the wad looks pretty good here, all things considered. So I think it did its job about as good as what it could have done through today's setup. Alright y'all, well, what did you think about that performance right there? That's a pretty solid pattern that's absolutely usable. I mean, you can run it in a deer drive or something, you can shoot hogs with it all day long, and it would be an absolute death sentence on a coyote or a fox or anything like that out to 40 or 50 yards without a doubt. So ultimately, looking pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't hesitate to use that combination on a 60 yard and in predator hunt, because that's going to absolutely roll them all day long. And like I mentioned a second ago, I didn't really know what we were going to see coming into it. That's a pretty tight choke and a lot of 4-buck pellets, and it could have absolutely ruined the pattern, but it really didn't. It might not be quite the best pattern we've seen from these as far as the overall size or how hot the core is, but it's a pretty even spread of them there. So definitely far from a terrible pattern, but I guess leave all your thoughts down in the comments. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of those copper-plated 41 pellet 4-buck loads or that Carlson's Coyote choke? And if so, what kind of results have you seen from them? And what other combinations do you guys want to see like this through that choke or with these shells or anything like that? Let me know all that down below. So with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.